In every community, there are challenges that seem too big to overcome. Economic struggles, social divides, or a sense of hopelessness often hold people back from realizing their full potential. But what if, deep down, there was one thing that could change it all? What if belief, pure, unshakable belief in the power of possibility, was the key? This is the story of how one person, driven by an unrelenting faith in their community's potential, changed everything. They didn't have all the answers, nor did they possess extraordinary resources. What they had was an unwavering belief in the idea that change was possible. And that belief ignited a movement. In the next few minutes, we'll explore how this person's vision, courage, and determination began a transformation that rippled through an entire community and eventually reached beyond. You'll see how one decision, rooted in belief, can not only reshape the future of a single person, but can also redefine an entire community. Join us on this journey of hope, resilience, and the true power of belief. Before the story of transformation began, the community was struggling. It was a place marked by apathy, where people had long stopped believing in the possibility of a brighter future. The streets, though filled with life, carried an underlying sense of hardship. The buildings were old and crumbling, much like the spirits of the people who lived within them. There were few opportunities for growth, and even fewer for those who were born into difficult circumstances. Families were stuck in cycles of poverty, businesses were failing, and youth were disengaged, without hope for what lay ahead. The sense of community was fading, and it seemed as though everyone was just getting by, going through the motions of life without a vision of anything beyond survival. People talked about their dreams, but it felt like they belonged to a different reality, one that was out of reach. It wasn't that people didn't care, they just didn't know where to start. In the face of these challenges, frustration was building. The social fabric was strained, and trust in local leaders was nearly non-existent. The town seemed divided, each person trying to carry their own weight, yet no one was lifting each other up. Without the belief that change was possible, people were resigned to the harsh realities they faced. But all that was about to change. There was a spark waiting to be lit, and that spark would come from one person's belief that things could be different. This was the moment when the community stood on the brink of something remarkable, though they didn't yet know it. Amidst the struggles of the community stood a person whose presence, though unassuming, would soon spark a wave of change. Meet Alex Carter, an ordinary individual with an extraordinary belief in the power of possibility. Alex wasn't rich, famous, or a politician. They didn't have connections to influential figures or vast resources. What they had was something far more powerful, a relentless, unwavering belief that things could improve. Alex had grown up in the same community, witnessing the hardships that many faced. But rather than accept the status quo, they chose to see beyond the current circumstances. From a young age, Alex had been driven by a deep sense of purpose, the idea that they were meant to help their community rise above its struggles. They believed that belief itself could ignite change. Physically, Alex was in their early 30s, with short-cropped hair and a look that reflected determination. Their wardrobe was simple but purposeful, comfortable clothes that allowed them to move easily in a variety of settings. Alex wasn't someone who sought attention. Their focus was always on how to make the most impact with the least amount of fanfare. Their soft-spoken demeanor contrasted with the fire burning within them, a quiet strength that drew others in. But perhaps Alex's most defining trait was their empathy. They listened when others spoke, and saw potential where others only saw obstacles. Alex believed that every person in the community had something valuable to offer. They just needed to believe in themselves first. In a place where most had given up on hope, Alex was the lone voice calling out that change was possible. They weren't a leader by title, but they would soon become the leader the community needed. With a clear vision in their heart and unwavering faith in their mind, Alex was about to lead a movement, one person at a time. It was a single conversation that would ignite the spark of belief that would change everything. One evening, while visiting a local community center, Alex sat down with a group of residents who had gathered for a town meeting. These were ordinary people, just like any others in the community. People who had seen dreams dashed, hopes fade, and opportunities slip away. As they discussed the problems facing their neighborhood, frustration hung heavy in the air. But then, something remarkable happened. In the midst of the pessimism, Alex spoke up, their voice calm but confident. They shared a vision, one that sounded simple yet profound. What if we could change this together? What if the belief that things could get better is the first step toward making it a reality? At first, the words seemed naive. Change had felt impossible for so long, and the idea of starting with belief alone was almost laughable to some. After all, they had all tried before. They had voted, protested, and hoped for external forces to bring about the change they so desperately wanted. But nothing had worked. Why should this time be any different? But Alex's belief was contagious. There was something in the way they spoke, an authenticity that made people sit up and listen. Alex wasn't talking about grand gestures or miracle solutions. They were talking about something much simpler, but infinitely more powerful. The belief that each person could make a difference, that the community could rise together if they believed in their collective power. In that moment, the room fell silent. Some were skeptical, others hopeful, and a few were deeply moved. For the first time in a long while, the idea of change didn't seem like a distant fantasy. It felt possible, it felt real, and it felt like something they could be a part of. Alex had given them a new lens through which to view their circumstances. The spark had been lit, but it needed fuel, action, persistence, and the courage to believe in something greater than themselves. Alex wasn't done yet. In fact, this was only the beginning. But that conversation, that one moment, was all it took to awaken something deep inside the hearts of the community. With the spark of belief now lit, Alex knew that the road ahead would be anything but easy. They had ignited hope, but hope alone couldn't build a community. Action was required. The first challenge was convincing people that change was possible, and more importantly, that they could be the ones to bring it about. In the early days, there was resistance. Skepticism loomed large. Many of the community members had seen promises broken, time and time again, whether from politicians, developers, or other well-meaning individuals who had come and gone. It was a hard pill to swallow, but Alex understood that without trust, there could be no real change. And trust wasn't something that could be demanded. It had to be earned, one small step at a time. At the local park, Alex held the first of many community meetings. The turnout was modest at first. Only a handful of people showed up. Some came out of curiosity, others out of a sense of obligation, but most were there to see if Alex's words would match their actions. The meeting was casual, a simple gathering under the shade of trees with lawn chairs arranged in a loose circle. Alex stood before the group, listening intently to their concerns. The challenges were clear. Unemployment was high, crime rates had spiked, and many felt forgotten by the city. Alex didn't have all the answers, but they didn't shy away from the tough topics. They acknowledged the community's pain and frustration without offering empty promises. Rather than making grand speeches, Alex began doing the small things, helping to clean up a local park, fixing broken streetlights, organizing food drives for the elderly. These weren't flashy projects, but they spoke volumes. Over time, people began to notice. Alex wasn't just talking about change, they were living it. Slowly but surely, the community started to trust Alex more. They saw the sincerity in every action. Trust was built not through words, but through consistent, humble effort. But the road wasn't without obstacles. There were days when it felt like nothing was working, and the progress seemed too slow. There were nights when Alex wondered if the community was ready to fully embrace the idea of change, or if they would once again fall into the cycle of doubt and inaction. Some people remained cynical, asking how one person could possibly make a difference in such a broken place. But Alex persisted, always showing up, always doing what they said they would. Gradually, the more consistent their efforts became, the more the community began to rally behind them. As the weeks went on, more people started attending the meetings, and the conversations shifted. What began as simple acts of service grew into a shared vision, ideas for community events, job training programs, and even small business initiatives. It was clear that change was possible, but only because the community trusted each other enough to begin believing in it. Alex had not just built a foundation of belief, but one of unity and trust. In that process, Alex's own growth became evident as well. They learned how to listen more deeply, to be patient when frustrations flared, and to lead with empathy. Trust wasn't just about showing up, it was about showing up with authenticity, even when the results weren't immediate. Through the ups and downs, Alex held the belief that if they kept showing up and kept pushing forward, the community would begin to see the change they all longed for. After weeks of hard work, small acts of kindness, and tireless effort, Alex began the first glimmers of real change in the community. It wasn't the kind of change that would make headlines overnight, but it was the type of transformation that would lay the groundwork for something much bigger. At first, it came in small, almost imperceptible moments that only those closest to the ground could recognize. The first sign came when the park Alex had been working to clean up, once littered with trash and forgotten by most of the community, began to show signs of life. One morning, Alex arrived to find a group of teenagers gathered under a tree, not loitering, but playing basketball and chatting with each other. This might have seemed trivial to an outsider, but to Alex, it was profound. The park had once been a place of disarray, a space no one wanted to spend time in, and yet, now it was a gathering point. These teenagers weren't just playing basketball, they were reclaiming a piece of their community, making it their own. Then came the local businesses. Alex had spoken with the owners of several small shops, encouraging them to reinvest in their storefronts. One by one, they began to take action, painting their signs, fixing windows, and sprucing up their shops. It wasn't just about aesthetics, it was a signal that they believed in the future of their neighborhood. A local bakery that had been struggling to stay afloat held a community event, giving out free samples to anyone passing by. It was a small gesture, but it started a ripple effect. More people came into the bakery that day than had in months, and business began to pick up slowly but surely. The community center, which had been a shadow of its former self, also started to see more foot traffic. Volunteers showed up to help organize events for local kids. The space, once empty and forgotten, now echoed with the laughter of children playing after school. It was a place that began to feel safe again, full of possibility. Alex could see the transformation in the way the local residents interacted with one another. There was a new sense of pride. Neighbors who once barely acknowledged each other on the street now stopped to chat, offering help, advice, or simply a smile. At the same time, Alex noticed a subtle shift in the energy of the meetings. In the early days, there had been a certain resignation in the room. People came because they felt they should, but not because they truly believed change was possible. Now, when Alex looked around, they saw faces filled with hope, eyes that were beginning to glimmer with possibility. People were no longer just attending to hear what Alex had to say. They were coming to contribute their own ideas, to offer solutions. There was a growing sense of ownership among the community members. They weren't waiting for someone else to fix things. They were realizing they were part of the solution. One of the most telling signs came from the response of local schools. The teachers, who had initially been hesitant about any outside intervention, now began to approach Alex with ideas for after-school programs, mentorship initiatives, and collaborative projects. Parents, once cynical about the school's ability to improve, began to volunteer. The schoolyard, once silent and neglected, became a place where kids could express themselves, work together, and build something positive. In all these small moments, Alex could see the vision they had for the community starting to take shape. It wasn't the grand transformation they had imagined in their dreams, but it was real. It was tangible, and it was spreading. The once quiet streets now felt alive with potential. These first signs of change were powerful reminders that progress doesn't always come in big, loud moments. Sometimes it's the quiet, steady shifts that have the most lasting impact. As Alex looked around, they knew that the journey was far from over. The road ahead was still filled with obstacles, but seeing the seeds of change beginning to grow gave them the strength to keep pushing forward. The first signs of change weren't just about what had already been accomplished. They were about what was yet to come. The full transformation of a community united by belief and action. As the weeks passed and the first signs of change took hold, something extraordinary began to happen. What started as a small, individual effort was beginning to spread. The belief Alex had ignited in a handful of people began to reach further into the community, fanning out like wildfire. It wasn't just the initial small group of dedicated individuals anymore. The entire community was beginning to embrace the idea that they had the power to create their own future. The first key to this spread was the word of mouth. People who had initially been skeptical about Alex's vision were now telling others about the changes they had seen. There were stories about how the park had gone from a place of neglect to a vibrant hub of activity. The kids playing basketball or riding their bikes weren't just playing, they were taking ownership of the space. And people began to see that. When neighbors walked by, they couldn't help but stop and smile, seeing the life and energy returning to the streets. The community members, who had been hesitant to join the meetings at first, now began inviting their friends, family, and neighbors. They talked about how they were getting involved, how their attitudes were shifting. It wasn't long before Alex started to see new faces in the weekly meetings. People who hadn't shown up before were now eager to take part. The idea that we can make a difference had started to resonate with people in a way that made them feel empowered. It was contagious. At the heart of it all was a sense of shared ownership. People were no longer waiting for someone else to make a change. They saw that Alex wasn't doing this alone. They were all in it together. So they began organizing their own initiatives, local cleanup days, fundraising events, and neighborhood beautification projects. A group of women from the community, inspired by Alex's work, organized a clothing drive for families in need. Another group started a mentorship program for at-risk youth, offering guidance, support, and positive role models. What was once a fragmented community was now united in a shared purpose. One of the most powerful moments of the spreading belief came when a small group of local business owners decided to collaborate on a neighborhood festival. They pooled their resources, set up stalls in the main square, and invited everyone to join in the celebration. The event was a huge success, not only because it brought people together, but because it showed the power of working collectively. What began as a few individual efforts to spruce up storefronts had turned into, rather than making grand speeches, Alex began doing the small things, helping to clean up a local park, fixing broken streetlights, organizing food drives for the elderly. These weren't flashy projects, but they spoke volumes. Over time, people began to notice. Alex wasn't just talking about change, they were living it. Slowly but surely, the community started to trust Alex more. They saw the sincerity in every action. Trust was built not through words, but through consistent, humble effort. But the road wasn't without obstacles. There were days when it felt like nothing was working, and the progress seemed too slow. There were nights when Alex wondered if the community was ready to fully embrace the idea of change, or if they would once again fall into the cycle of doubt and inaction. Some people remained cynical, asking how one person could possibly make a difference in such a broken place. But Alex persisted, always showing up, always doing what they said they would. Gradually, the more consistent their efforts became, the more the community began to rally behind them. As the weeks went on, more people started attending the meetings, and the conversations shifted. What began as simple acts of service grew into a shared vision. Ideas for community events, job training programs, and even small business initiatives. It was clear that change was possible, but only because the community trusted each other enough to begin believing in it. Alex had not just built a foundation of belief, but one of unity and trust. In that process, Alex's own growth became evident as well. They learned how to listen more deeply, to be patient when frustrations flared, and to lead with empathy. Trust wasn't just about showing up, it was about showing up with authenticity, even when the results weren't immediate. Through the ups and downs, Alex held the belief that if they kept showing up and kept pushing forward, the community would begin to see the change they all longed for. After weeks of hard work, small acts of kindness, and tireless effort, Alex began the first glimmers of real change in the community. It wasn't the kind of change that would make headlines overnight, but it was the type of transformation that would lay the groundwork for something much bigger. At first, it came in small, almost imperceptible moments that only those closest to the ground could recognize. The first sign came when the park Alex had been working to clean up, once littered with trash and forgotten by most of the community, began to show signs of life. One morning, Alex arrived to find a group of teenagers gathered under a tree, not loitering, but playing basketball and chatting with each other. This might have seemed trivial to an outsider, but to Alex, it was profound. The park had once been a place of disarray, a space no one wanted to spend time in, and yet, now it was a gathering point. These teenagers weren't just playing basketball, they were reclaiming a piece of isolated project had captured the attention of thousands of people, many of whom were living in areas that faced similar challenges. Soon, neighboring communities that had seen the media coverage started reaching out. At first, it was just a few phone calls, a handful of inquiries. But then, more and more towns wanted to learn how they could replicate the success in their own neighborhoods. Alex received emails, letters, and messages from leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens across the region, asking for advice on how to bring the same belief-driven transformation to their own communities. They wanted to know how one person's conviction and one community's collective belief could ignite change on such a large scale. Rather than keeping the success to themselves, Alex and the community leaders were eager to share their knowledge. They began hosting workshops, creating detailed plans for other towns to follow, and offering guidance on how to get started. People from outside the community began to visit, observing the changes firsthand and speaking with the individuals who had been part of the journey. The leaders who had helped push the community forward became mentors to those who were just beginning their own paths of transformation. The ripple effect didn't just reach neighboring towns. It went beyond the city and even beyond the state. What had started as an experiment in one area soon inspired national organizations and activists who saw the potential of community-driven, belief-based change. The message resonated with people from all walks of life, from urban centers to rural villages. Across the nation, people began organizing grassroots movements based on the belief that they could change their environments through collective action and self-empowerment. In one neighboring city, a group of concerned citizens watched the changes happening in Alex's community and felt inspired. They had long struggled with high crime rates and a lack of resources. But after learning about Alex's approach, they came together and organized a series of community meetings, just as Alex had done years earlier. At first, their efforts were met with resistance, but slowly, people started showing up. The local businesses chipped in, just as they had in Alex's community, and soon, they organized their own local festival, showcasing the arts and talents of the residents. A mural was painted on a once dilapidated wall, symbolizing the renewal of hope. The belief that we can change this had taken root, and it began to spread, not just within the city, but across nearby towns and even into neighboring states. What was particularly powerful about the ripple effect was how it began to transcend traditional borders. What started as a local effort to revitalize a community was now part of a broader cultural shift. The focus was no longer just on fixing a neighborhood, it was on changing the way people viewed themselves and each other. Across the country, people started to recognize the untapped potential within themselves and within their communities. The belief that they could create positive change in their own lives and environments spread like wildfire. Even larger organizations took notice. Foundations that supported community development began to adopt the principles behind Alex's movement. They began investing in programs designed to foster self-belief and collective action, funding grassroots efforts to inspire local residents to take charge of their own futures. This shift in the funding landscape meant that communities once dependent on external aid were now given the tools and support they needed to make lasting change from within. Perhaps one of the most striking examples of this transformation came when national politicians and leaders began to reference Alex's community as a model for success. The story was featured in leadership seminars, in schools, and in policy discussions as a shining example of what happens when individuals and communities take ownership of their own futures. In government circles, the story was used as an illustration of how public policy could support rather than hinder local empowerment efforts. As Alex stood on the steps of the community center, looking out over the once struggling neighborhood that had now become a thriving hub of possibility, it was clear that the ripple effect had touched far more than just the people in this community. It had become a beacon of what could happen when belief in one another and in the power of collective action was allowed to flourish. What had started as a single act of belief had sparked a wave of transformation that stretched far beyond anything Alex could have imagined. And the most extraordinary part was that this ripple was still growing, spreading further each day, as new communities and individuals embraced the idea that they, too, had the power to change their world. As Alex reflects on the journey that began with a single belief, it becomes evident how powerful conviction can be. What started as an individual's vision to change a community has blossomed into a movement that has reached far beyond its initial scope. The transformation was not simply physical, how the community looked, how it functioned, but mental, emotional, and spiritual. It was about belief, first and foremost. Belief that people, no matter where they come from or what they have been through, have the power to shape their own futures. The real power of belief lies in its ability to transcend fear and doubt. When Alex first began, many thought the idea was too ambitious, too unrealistic. But through perseverance and the unwavering belief that change was possible, Alex was able to prove that transformation was not only possible, it was inevitable, given enough trust and dedication. The community's belief in themselves and in each other became the catalyst for every success they would go on to achieve. In the reflection of the broader impact, Alex can see the lives that have been changed not just in the community, but also in the countless people who saw this success story and believed they could do the same. The ripple effect of belief has shown that when one person dares to believe in something greater than themselves, they can inspire an entire collective to do the same. This transformation, fueled by belief, has proven that when people come together, trust one another, and share a common goal, anything is possible. The power of belief is not just about seeing the potential in others, it's about seeing it in oneself. It's about understanding that the belief we carry can impact and shape the world around us. Alex's journey has become a testament to the incredible strength of human conviction and how it can create lasting, meaningful change. The true power of belief lies in its ability to inspire, uplift, and ignite a chain of actions that can change not just individuals but entire communities, and in some cases, the world. As we reach the conclusion of this remarkable journey, it's clear that the power of belief is a force that transcends individual efforts and creates a legacy that lasts long after the initial spark. Alex's story is not just about one person's determination. It's about how a single act of belief can ripple outward, creating a profound and lasting impact on an entire community. What started as a dream became a living, breathing testament to the power of possibility. Through unwavering faith, perseverance, and the willingness to challenge the status quo, Alex was able to help transform a community that once felt hopeless and disjointed into a thriving, connected, and empowered place. But even more powerful than the physical transformation of buildings and infrastructure was the internal shift. The change in mindset, the belief that every individual has the power to shape their own future. This journey is not a finite story. It is one that will continue to unfold. The community that Alex helped build has now become a model for others to follow. The belief that sparked change has inspired countless others to take that first step toward believing in the impossible. Alex's legacy lives on through every life touched by this movement. And as more people embrace the power of belief, the world can use to shift. One person, one community at a time. In the end, the legacy of change that Alex has created is a powerful reminder of what can happen when we dare to believe in the potential of others and in ourselves. It's a reminder that no matter how small the beginning, belief in a better future can lead to extraordinary change. This story is a call to action for us all, to believe, to act, and to create a lasting impact on the world around us.